Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And here we are in episode 44 and a continuation of our January Dumping Ground episode from last week.
And this is also the first time in a long time that we're trying to do this over video call as well. The last time we did one over video call, I believe it was another lost episode. I think we were also doing From Dusk Till Dawn then. So fingers crossed that we've actually successfully got this out. And we will find out.
We've got the video going, we've got the voices going. I don't know if you just saw me a second ago. I literally lifted up my headset to just double check that the sound is not coming through the computer screen as well, because that was the problem last time. We had reverb of the sound going round and round. That was my fault. I put my headphones in, then I decided, I don't want these in. I took them out like partly in the first couple of minutes because I was like, I don't like this. Took them out and then realized, I'm hearing Rob in the speaker and I'm also hearing, and therefore everyone's hearing me twice in the whole episode, or everyone's hearing Rob twice, in the whole episode. So it was a bit of a mess up. So our sound quality this week might not be quite as clear as normal because I'm pretty much on my laptop mic, not the best. Rob's doing it through his headset, but we've also at the same time would normally be on your fantastic Snowballs, which is far better sound quality than this.
Definitely, and we'd be in person as well, so it's kind of it's a bit of an interesting one because you've obviously, if you follow us on Twitter at CMTH Podcast, we have announced that unfortunately. Seb has got the COVID-19.
I have indeed. So I would be infecting you right now if we were recording this. It's like an hour and a half of breathing into your face because normally our setup is we are literally sat like, even I'd probably say a large centimeter ruler is about where about one of those big 30 centimeter rulers is like the standard school kind of one is about.
It's very cozy, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're normally cozy. Right there next to each other.
And now I put my hand to the screen.
Yes. Rob is probably feeling a sad distance. He likes his hugs and his cuddles.
I'm a very physical man. Well, I guess we'll just jump straight into it. So last week, if you didn't kind of check out the episode on Madman from 1982, we're looking at what we've kind of coined, or I don't know if we've coined it, but we're calling it for a series, the January Dumping Ground. Last year, this was the lost episode, which kind of went. We did From Dusk Till Dawn, which we'll be talking about today, and The Stepfather. And last week we did about Madman from 1982. And we're kind of looking at these films that kind of they don't release in these are predominantly horror films. They don't release in the kind of later part of the year, October, November. Expect most horror films to come out, and they obviously don't come out in the summer, where the big blockbuster periods are. So they're just kind of thrown out, potentially left out to die a little bit in the January Dumping Ground. So last week we did Madman and we looked at that and we kind of decided that, that probably deserved its place in the January Dumping Ground, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. As you mentioned, these are these lost films that kind of no studio knows how to market them or look after them, and Madman was right there in kind of, did it deserve? And we were just like, kind of. We found it to be, it's an obscure horror. So a lot of people don't know what it is. I think even when we've advertised our most recent episode, some people might have gone, what was that? I don't know. It's a very strange film, and although we enjoyed some kills and stuff like that, in general we decided it just isn't a strong enough film to say it's not deserving of its place in the dumping ground. So this week, instead, we go from Madman to some mad men in Robert Rodriguez's From Dusk Till Dawn.
And we're taking a jump to the 1990s, aren't we, as we go to 1996. And was this the first team up from them, or was this one of the? Because obviously Quentin Tarantino wrote this film. You can tell that he's got quite a heavy influence in it. Robert Rodriguez is obviously known for making these kind of. They're not completely kind of B movie films, but they're very stylized in the way in which he makes them. He does fall into kind of being an auteur, doesn't he? When his hands have been on a film. And it is a very, heavy film with a lot of the kind of Rodriguez style in it. But I don't know, was this the first film that they kind of made together? I don't know.
I believe From Dusk Till Dawn is the first of their kind of team ups, and I think it is the most close of a team up because they haven't really teamed up in the same way again. They did their Death Proof and Planet Terror, kind of the grindhouse thing. Yeah, it was kind of working together, but it was like separate directors making separate films, separately their own kind of visions for a kind of grindhouse kind of cinema. But I don't think that they've done a movie like this before, especially where Tarantino was the writer. I mean, although he's written several things in the past that he hasn't directed, it's normally a case of what he writes is what he makes, kind of thing. Yeah. Rodriguez is kind of all over the place. He's a producer, he's a writer, he's a director. He works on a lot of different areas. Because this was even one of Rodriguez's earlier films, and it was Tarantino's earlier kind of where he'd actually been picked up to do something, because Rodriguez obviously had done the Once Upon a Time in Mexico kind of trilogy.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember which is the first part of that, because I know we did. Was it El Mariachi, which was the first one?
Yeah. So and in 1992 he made that, so a few years before this one.
Yeah.
So it was El Mariachi, Desperado, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico were the three of that trilogy. Once Upon a Time Mexico came after, I believe. Desperado, I think, might have still been, because that had good old
Desperado was
Antonio Banderas.
Yeah.
So before this one.
And then obviously went on to The Faculty. I always forget that he directed that.
Because he's got a cool kind of style he brings to it. Like with like say Scream a couple of weeks ago, because that was a Kevin Williamson written film, and he brought we both said that we're both big fans of that film, as it was a kind of alternative. But Rodriguez has always had a kind of a fun that he can bring to a film, a kind of stylized eye. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's an auteur the same way that Tarantino is. Tarantino is very obviously recognizable, whereas Rodriguez can sometimes have a bit of a different style to the way his films are directed. We are a big fan of Spy Kids. His work in that.
Yeah, I guess saying that, thinking about that,
But I definitely say though that although Tarantino's visual style might be more like that, Rodriguez is still just as mainly consistent director as Tarantino. I'd almost say that Rodriguez is just more willing to take some risks.
Yeah, potentially. But when you look at his what he's directed, obviously this From Dusk Till Dawn itself is a kind of strange hybrid of a film, isn't it? I mean, it's an action and it's a horror film, but it's also does find into that grindhouse thing. It's got a lot of kind of cameos from people, and again, I remember when we did this around this time last year, we were kind of talking about George Clooney at the time. I'm trying to remember if he was still doing ER at the time or not.
Yeah,
but he wasn't quite. This was one of the films that kind of helped launch him in a way, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. This was seen as a completely kind of, he was seen as the heartthrob. He was the TV heartthrob, like the big TV heartthrob, and this is the one that kind of blasted him off, because it was like, oh, he's more than just the good-looking guy. Not that he's not the good-looking guy in this film.
He is. He's a sexual mad.
he is a sexual man, but he's not quite as, he has a darker edge here. He gets to have a bit more fun being maybe in a film that people wouldn't expect of Clooney at that time when he was the big ER doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just
Juliette Lewis was this was around the same time that kind of Juliette Lewis was kind of in a way she was kind of exploding, because I remember her being in this in the 90s. She did From Dusk Till Dawn, she did Cape Fear, and then she did Natural Born Killers as well, amongst kind of other things, obviously. But
well, Natural Born Killers actually came before this one. That was 1994. So she was very much she was pretty much peak at this time of this kind of, just looking at her anyway, she kind of always had this darker edge to her, Juliette Lewis.
Yeah.
And she was kind of peak teen to be like, it was either her or Christina Ricci for 90s, kind of, if you want a twisted kind of child, it was probably Christina Ricci or Juliette Lewis who you were looking at. As I say, like Tarantino, like he hadn't written, because he also wrote the story for Natural Born Killers. So there's a link there between why certain cast members are in both films of Tarantino films, and they're also in this film. He'd done Pulp Fiction, obviously, True Romance, another great. So a lot of these kind of, you can see where these are all very Tarantino, dark, gritty, but with a kind of black comedy edge to them.
Yeah, there's always a strange humor to kind of Tarantino stuff, isn't there?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, so he'd done a couple of films that he hadn't written by that point. That I think he'd been asked to direct some of these films, but at that point he just wasn't in the space. So I think after Reservoir Dogs hit, he didn't really want it to be. He didn't want to take a chance that he wasn't making. He was waiting for the script that he'd written that was really like, oh no, this is the film. So I mean, this is it. And Pulp Fiction. So Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction. I think he kind of decided, like, a lot of these scripts I think were all written around the same time. Although Pulp Fiction was released in 1994 and Natural Born Killers, he'd written the scripts, but they weren't really they weren't the film that he decided. Oh no, like Pulp Fiction is the one. But then after that, I want something different, and I don't want to be stuck in that same gritty, gangstery kind of. That's why he went on to do still gritty and gangstery, but he did Jackie Brown after this, which is a little bit different. And then and then he took a big break before Kill Bill. So Tarantino is all over the place. In the 90s and early 2000s, I mean, he was pretty much like the biggest
go-to
for these kind of indie flicks, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, it's got a relatively good sized budget, I think. I mean, like Wikipedia's got its budget being at 90 million. I mean, it's a hefty budget when you compare it to I think it was 350,000 maybe that Madman had back in 1982. It's definitely got a bigger budget, and it went on to make 59.3 million. And obviously, it kind of came
underperformed.
It underperformed, yeah. But then again, it's a strange horror action mashup that's released in January.
Oh yeah, this film was completely. I remember I don't remember because I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Yes.
But I remember like from what I know of it, I know that this film was completely sold under that Tarantino. It had Reservoir Dogs. It had Pulp Fiction. It was basically sold as if this was directed by Quentin Tarantino. Robert Rodriguez, although big, the Desperado El Mariachi, although they were like hits, they were much more kind of South America kind of hits. I mean, not North America, kind of worldwide. So it was Tarantino was the one all over these posters, and George Clooney.
Mr. George Clooney. Yeah. Well, I mean, the opening of the film kind of is quite Tarantino-esque in its way, I think. I mean, obviously he wrote it, so his fingerprints are going to be all over it. But when it opens up in the liquor store with the Gecko brothers, that's it.
That's
such a good scene. Yeah, and when I watched it, I always forget that this scene happens. I'm not sure why. I just always forget that it opens up with them in the liquor store, and they're not even in it first. They're kind of obviously both in the toilet or wherever they're hidden, and I completely forget that it kind of opens up with the liquor store owner, I think Pete or someone like that, and there's random people, and then he just gets shot out of nowhere. Um,
Yeah, it's because Pete. Yeah, John Hawkes is the actor who plays
yeah,
him again, who completely caught me off because he's a fairly known kind of character, kind of actor that went on from this in this like little role. And I was like, oh, I recognize that guy, but yeah, I completely forget. I mean, I think this is one of those things. So as we're like talking about it as the January jumping ground and stuff like that, and why studios found it hard to market, I can completely understand why people would find this film hard to market because, like you said, I forgot when I rewatched this film that literally I only remembered really the vampire part of the film, the titty
yeah,
twister. As you've
yeah.
got Rob as a background as we like record this with video as well for people who can't see it, who are listening, and it's got titty twisters right there, so it's burned into my brain right now.
So we
But
have to remember that we have to get rid of it in case I have any work Zoom meetings because there was I put I once did a Zoom call for someone's birthday in lockdown and I changed my name to Big Fat Hog, and then I did a Zoom meeting for work and it came up as like, do you want to join the meet? It basically said my name was Big Fat Hog and I managed to just change it just before anybody noticed.
well, I've got the same problem. This is my school laptop. So
Yeah,
and we do a weekly like celebration at the moment because we don't do assemblies together. We do a weekly like
yeah.
celebration over Zoom. So if I forget to change Cast Me to Hell off of my background, which is what's appearing right now, I would literally go into the meeting with the kids not being able to see anything but just Cast Me to Hell. And obviously
It's better than the Titty Twister.
it's better than Titty Twister, but I'd still think I'd get some questions off the teacher, like off the head teacher, why is that on your background with an animated you fighting off zombies with school children?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, back to the what I was kind of saying was, as you said about not remembering a part of the film. Like I didn't remember the opening. I don't remember much of the build-up. I just remembered that kind of when it actually kicks off, which is actually a lot later in the film than I remembered. But it's also interesting that it's like you can totally see, as you said before, this is like a hybrid of like a black comedy, an action film, a vampire horror film. It's a lot of things processed into one. So I completely understand why, for a 90 million budget film, why this would have actually been, how do we sell this? Are we selling this as a George Clooney action film? Are we selling this as a horror film, a 90 million budget horror film? That's unusual at the time. So you can tell why they probably sold it as action and pretty much sold it as, here's action, here's Salma Hayek looking like that. Come and watch it, boys. Like, but probably not selling it. Sorry, I said 90 million a second. I meant 19 million. 90 million is way, but still 19 million was still fairly, not necessarily for a horror film, but in that time, it was still 19 million was quite high, even in the 90s for a horror film. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's like you said. I mean, we open up with this kind of strange, and it has that kind of dark humor that Tarantino has. And Tarantino's humor it's not like laugh out loud kind of stuff, is it? It's not like comedy. It's not like punchlines or anything. But it's like making these strange situations that you would expect to be kind of extremely tense, kind of having these characters who are slightly larger than life in it. The one that always springs to mind is Pulp Fiction at the start with Julius. Because that if Julius had been played straight and hadn't been, given lines that were or given dialogue hadn't been played in that way, it would have come off as just a really tense scene. But when you watch it back, it's kind of like this is tense, but there's also this strange kind of humor there, and it's he makes scenes that are very easy to watch, I find, A
Yeah,
lot of the characters done well.
he's good with exposition scenes that would normally be boring and normally be
Yeah.
like, oh, we're setting up who these brothers are, but instead they kind of tell it through the brothers having this kind of mid gunfight conversations and stuff, kind of selling that they're not the best of guys, that they're the Gecko brothers. That we kind of get that information in a very quick burst between John Hawke's shop assistant or whatever he is, Pete,
Yeah.
kind of people blasting back at them. And I love it. I absolutely love the way that I feel sorry for him, because it's like, well, he's not a bad guy in any way. Like, it shows these guys is also, we straight away know that the Gecko brothers are not really good guys because they off-hit that Pete character in a pretty horrific way.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a cool death, man. You know, they're just suppressing fire here, shooting all of the bottles behind. And then George Clooney lights the toilet paper on fire and chucks it back. And yeah, it's just such a. I'm not sure how I completely forgot about it, because I always remember watching this film loads with my brother Dan, kind of early 2000s. I always remember him saying, "Oh, From Dusk Till Dawn's on like this channel," and it would be on really late. I always remember in my mind, it's almost like the film started when they got to the titty twister.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And I completely forgot everything else.
I think maybe it's because, again, I hadn't really revisited this film in a very long time before we watched it. And I remember thinking, about that part. But that's probably because that's the part that kind of sticks out in your mind, especially at your early pre-teens. That's probably why you're only remembering Salma Hayek looking like that, and you're only remembering vampires and battling vampires, but you don't remember the kind of nuances that we have early in the film to kind of set up these characters. We have certain that Tarantino we know is good at, and also Rodriguez is also very good at kind of showing character, and Tarantino's good at explaining character and giving us likable kind of characters that might be a bit different, but we kind of enjoy following them. And the literally about, I think I remember us saying like, it was, I didn't count this time, but I know a year ago in our last episode, we said it was about, I swear it was about 40 odd minutes until they actually, 40, 50 minutes until they actually get to that point. So it's amazing how much you kind of forget that a lot of it, they build the characters before the characters get trapped in this impossible situation.
Yeah, way before. Because obviously we open up with the scene in the liquor store, and then we go over to, is it the motel, where we have Harvey Keitel, Julia Lewis, and I can never remember the actor's name, but I know the character's called Scott. It's very strange that I remember I remember the character's name but not him. It does. Okay,
is it the priest Harvey Keitel?
No, it's not Harvey Keitel. It's the his son.
Oh,
right. The Asian boy, I guess.
The Asian boy.
The Asian boy. I can't remember the name. Ernest Liu.
Yeah, I wouldn't remember that.
Yeah,
I was gonna say there's a lot of actors who are like, oh, I know them in this film, but then there's Ernest Liu, who I don't know from. I can't think of anything else I know him from.
He doesn't have a Wikipedia page, funnily enough. So I don't know whether this was the last film he ever made. The
first and the last. He was like, I'm not doing that again. I couldn't stop laughing a second ago because, again, on the video with your titty twister background, as you leant back, it was basically like you were cupping, cupping the side for the titty twisters. Your hands went back there. I was like, I was just laughing as you were talking. So I think to kind of, I'm going to kind of jump to the main kind of areas that I kind of remember, and I think are good talking points before we get into the big craziness. I kind of think that's the bit that, as we said, that's the bit people remember. That's the meat that people kind of want. If you haven't seen it, you go and watch it, because I love the character building. I think that's what makes this a good film, is that we get to know these characters, or hate these characters in a certain way. There's a certain way, especially Tarantino's. Is it Seth, or am I mixing up the characters? Is it Seth or Richie?
Richie. Seth is George
Clooney.
Mr. George Clooney.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. I mixed it up. Richie. We've had a lot of characters called Richie in our. We had we had a Richie in Scream. We have a Richie in Madman, and we've got a Richie in From Dusk Till Dawn.
And they're always weird, aren't they?
They're always,
always weird.
They're always weird characters. Yeah, they're a bit creepy, odd, kind of oddballs, or with slight kind of dark humor about them.
Yeah.
Except for Madman's Richie, he was just fucking weird. Madman Mars.
He was just skulking.
Yeah, but anyway. I think the key character that we kind of really get to we get to know that George Clooney's Seth Gecko is, although he's kind of like that teetering bad guy, he's kind of not fully a bad guy, he's like an anti-hero almost in this film. He's a mixture of that kind of he does bad things, but he also knows the line where not to cross certain lines. And that's something that Richie definitely doesn't know. And he's a problem.
No, well, they play. I mean, Tarantino is he's a bit of he's quite an eccentric guy anyway, isn't he? And I think the way in which he plays Richie, there's just something about him that just adds another layer of kind of creepiness, I think. I mean, the one scene that comes to mind for me is when he's staring at Juliette Lewis's feet, and I know there's that thing online about how, Tarantino loves feet, and he probably does, and it's not the worst kink to have, I guess. You could have it if you want, but
yeah, I think that's a fairly well-known kind of thing that he's into. I mean, especially Uma Thurman's feet in anything he's had. He always seems to have a shot of a foot, in quite a lot of his. Not every single film he does, no, but in quite a lot of them, he has this kind of long shot. It's almost as if that's the one scene where he took over from Rodriquez. I'll get this one. I'll get right deep into this one. I'll dig on it.
I got this. Yeah, it's just. Robert Rodriguez is looking for the script. He's like, "There's a lot of talk of feet in this film."
Yeah, it's like
it's imperative to the story that I licked Salma Hayek's feet.
Yeah, it's very important that I see all of their feet. Literally in the script, as it says, an extended 40 to 50 minute shot of foot.
Yeah,
and then Robert Rodriguez is like, okay, maybe if we have 40 to 50 seconds, and he's well, I guess, could we do the 40 to 50 minute one, and I'll keep the footage and you just keep 40 to 50 seconds?
Yeah, he's a very strange man.
He is, but that is, you're right, it's what adds to the character. He looks thin and pale. He looks like he has those. I believe it's in Deadpool 2 or something, where he says you've got those pedo lips, or those.
Yeah.
He's got all of that working for him in this film, and he's just. I don't know what he is. If he's meant to be played up as, he's definitely played up as some kind of psychopath. Yeah, he doesn't seem to understand these boundaries in his head. He can't stop.
Yeah, but he gets a lot of kind of hallucinations, or potentially hallucinations, of interpreting people saying different things and stuff like that. Particularly the scene that I think you're probably eager to talk about is in the motel room when when Richie has just kidnapped that random woman. And it's the way in which he just kind of he interprets things. And they definitely they play up that he's got some kind of condition, don't they?
They play. Yeah, it's kind of like that old of Mice and Men, like Lenny, kind of he's George Clooney's Seth's Lenny. He has to look after him. He has to care. But I think in that motel scene, it's as if it's the early stages of that, and he didn't quite realize.
Isn't Lenny the one that gets shot?
Yeah.
Oh,
Richie's the Lenny, not
Richie's
George Clooney.
I thought you said that's the thing with doing it over video. I thought you said Seth is Lenny. I was like, no, what's his actual name? Yeah.
Over this video kind of style, there is always that little bit of we're better than we were last time we did this, Rob. Last time we had loads of big pauses. We're like, who's talking next? Like we're
Yeah.
doing better than we were.
Definitely.
But no, the whole Lenny thing is no. I'm talking about Richie. Like the Lenny in that story has to be like cared for and looked after really closely by his brother, because he doesn't realize how bad his actions are. And I feel like we've got a little bit of that with Seth. But the motel scene is almost, you see the realization when Seth walks back into the motel after he's left him. Like he didn't actually expect him to be as bad as he is.
Yeah. And I love that we don't see anything, do we? We just see we just kind of see Seth's reaction to it, really, and his kind of realization that he needs to do something. And I think the difference is kind of they have that kind of is it George from Mice and Men who's
it's George and Lenny.
Okay, yeah, the way in which they kind of have that relationship, but Lenny is almost a good person, who just doesn't realize and doesn't understand boundaries and stuff like that. Whereas Richie kind of is a bit sick as well, and is a bit kind of it's almost like he enjoys the violence in a strange way,
that's what I'm saying. It's like more like as if it's if Lenny was like a psychopath, basically, because Lenny is more he in that of Mice and Men story, he has the struggle of he doesn't quite know his own strength. That's what leads him into problems. He kind of he's got very like special needs kind of problems that like he has to deal with, whereas this isn't the same, but it's a comparison, like kind of that there's that psychopath who Seth has to look after and kind of keep at bay, and he has to keep his brother at bay. He has to keep watching an eye on his brother throughout the film. He's kind of got an eye on his brother. And like you said, that scene, what is so good about that scene is that although we get some kind of shots, we don't see Richie. We don't see Richie kill her. We see like the build up to it, and something's bad here when he says like, come and sit next to me on the bed and watch this. There's something wrong, that something bad's going to happen. You can tell he's a creep. But it's also like strongly implied, not just that he's murdered her. Like you see a few flashes of blood and like parts of her body, but you don't actually see any gory parts like ripped open or stabbed. It's just blood bits. And then there's also the shot that I think is quite inclusive of what he's also done, is that the way her legs are kind of parted, so it's kind of like he's raped and killed her, not just killed her. So it shows like how fucked up this character is. Yeah,
it's kind of fucked, isn't it? We kind of get the same implication later on with Juliette Lewis's character, don't we? When Richie first meets her, it's we get this kind of implication that maybe Richie interprets something around women and thinks that they want him. It's the whole kind
there's
of
literally a scene where Juliette Lewis you see what it's like in his head, because he's literally as if she's asking him to like fuck me or something like that kind of thing. There is a scene that shows like his head is seeing it in that way. He sees everything in this kind of cut lines of it's either like, it's almost like he sees that either fuck me or kill me, and that's kind of what he kind of sees life in his mind. It's all about killing someone, and Seth is always having to hold him back in a way, I think. Although he doesn't do it very well. He lets him off the leash far too much. So after that we kind of get, obviously they're on the run. We don't get it. We again in the exposition at the beginning, but it's not a boring exposition, as we said. But we also know that they've robbed a bank. That's how they got the bank teller lady in the back of their car.
They meet Carlos.
Yeah, they're on the run, and then they end up in, just to kind of cut to they end up with Harvey Keitel, Juliette Lewis, and I've already forgot his name again. Scott in the camper van, the RV, whatever you call it, motorhome.
The RV. Well, I don't know what. I know I always struggle to call those things. I don't know if a motorhome is like a bigger one.
I don't know.
They end up.
I don't know the difference. We have a caravans more over here, and they're more you pull it along than inside driving yourself. So
but then I don't know. I think motorhomes are maybe ones that you drive as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe that's
so. This is more of a motorhome.
Yes.
And
then I don't know. I think once once we get to the bar, like you said, it is kind of about 40 minutes. They have a moment where they feel they're close to getting kind of caught by the border control as they go into Mexico, but once they get through Mexico, they kind of they just they head to the titty twister, and then we're introduced to quite a lot of the characters. So obviously we get Tom Savini's Sex Machine, who's absolutely class. The little winky gun is awesome, and the a whip yet again. It's a very sexual outfit for then Sex Machine. And we get Frost, which is the Vietnam veteran.
Yeah, Fred Williamson. Yeah,
Fred Williamson. Classic. Yeah, we get obviously we have Cheech, who's I can never remember what his name is, but he's the one who's outside going, "Pussy, we got pussy."
He plays like two roles in this film, though. He plays the one out the front, and he plays he plays the border guard. Actually, he's the border guard. He's Chet Pussy out the front. Pussy, he's meant to be like he's the owner, isn't he? I think he's meant to imply that he's like I think he might be the owner. And then there's Carlos. Is Carlos the one he meets at the end?
Yeah, Carlos is the one he meets at the end. I always thought Chet Pussy wasn't an owner, but was more like when you go uptown, or you go into you go uptown, and then you're having like a few drinks, and then there's somebody who's got like a student who's got a flyer for like shots off at Moo-Moos.
I guess so. I mean, I don't really know if it's just the fact that he's got such a Chet Pussy at the titty twister just seems like the kind of person who he might be. He's not really made clear who owns this place in the film, so I don't know.
It might be a stage name. You never know. Chet Pussy. Can't imagine anybody actually calling the child Chet Pussy.
I mean, you've got like the house band, like Tito and Tarantula as the titty twister house band. And Michael Parks as the Texas Ranger, kind of El McGraw. But you've got all these like odd and there's plenty of other ones that I don't know the name of, but the bar is packed full of random different characters that we kind of get to know, kind of thing, as it goes on. There's a fair amount of time that we kind of get to know, but straight away they're not in the good books as soon as they walk into Titty Twisters.
Well, they beat the shit out of Chet Pussy, don't they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they fill Chet Pussy, which obviously don't beat the owner up. If he is the owner, don't beat the owner up. And then don't beat up the promo people. Imagine doing that. Imagine like you go out with your friends for like a few drinks, and then you're like walking through the streets, and somebody's like, "Oh, hey guys, here's a free flyer for this club," and you beat the shit out of them. And then you go to the club, and then they turn up and they're like, "Oh, those people beat the shit out of me." You're not just gonna like let that. They're not just gonna be, "Oh, that's fine." It's kind of a strange move.
It is,
but then I get it's the Gecko Brothers, isn't it?
I think it's part of their thing.
Is it Richie who?
It is Richie. It's Richie getting them the shit straight away. It's him being a complete fucking pain in Seth's ass by overdoing it, going crazy, and that's kind of what leads to like pretty quickly they go and sit at the bar, but the bar fight pretty much is kicking in pretty fast.
Yeah,
because they're like, get this fucker out, because Chet Pussy does kind of come back bar, like all the guys that were with him kind of come into the bar, and straight away they're into like a battle. I mean, it's not.
Well, we get Selma Hayek's sexy dance first, don't we?
You do. As you're like walking in, you get the what is pretty much Selma Hayek is pretty much. She wasn't a huge actress or anything at this time, so she's not saying she's huge, but she's a known actress. But Santanico Pandemonium, as she does. So we get that whole dance, which is any young lads of a certain age or lasses of probably absolutely were loving this scene back then. Coming of age, this is a big scene for you, I'm sure.
It was it was a sexual awakening for many people, I'm sure. You know what I mean? It's such a good dance, and then she pours the shot into from her foot, from her leg, and the going down the toe into Richie's mouth, which was like, Tarantino being like, that's happening.
Yeah, that's
or he just made her do that. And they just happened to be filming it, and he was really insistent that they don't take that out.
Yeah, he's like, get that foot in my mouth now.
Yeah. But once the bar fight, because the bar fight happens, and they're revealed to be vampires.
Yeah,
And
and
then
it just goes crazy.
yeah. Well, after that part, and then Richie kills one of them, doesn't he? He shoots whoever it is, and then they kind of reanimate and end up come back up, and then end up biting Richie.
Yeah.
Which then triggers, Salma Hayek to go to kind of morph into the vampire, which sets off the whole kind of chain of events. And then it's the thing about this film is it takes a long time to get to the point where shit kicks off, basically, and then everything kind of happens really fast. So
yeah, it does.
So even as soon as they've they've killed they've killed some of the vampires, because this is where the blood and the guts really come out, because everybody's getting slaughtered. We get I love the transformations that they have. I love how the vampires look in this, because they're kind of slightly reptilian, aren't they?
No, it's really cool. It kind of matches the kind of desert kind of, the setting outside. It kind of matches that kind of desert setting, that they're almost like a vampire, but a kind of reptile or amphibian kind of monster kind of mix.
Yeah. And then we get these really cool kind of fight scenes. The way in which I like the action in this film is, it feels kind of 70s martial arts in a way, We get these people kind of squaring off at each other. Nothing seems to be kind of overly elaborate, but you seem to get very quick action. Like the scene where Frost flips a table over, and then very quickly starts throwing the vampire strippers onto it. A lot of these sequences happen very quickly, kind of show off these people's kind of cool individual moves. But again, that action scene kind of seems to happen quite quickly. And then we get you first, man.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, obviously we know that Tarantino's inspirations. He loves old karate, kind of kung fu kind of movies. He loves blaxploitation films.
Yeah, it's a tricky word.
And Frost, Fred Williamson, he's quite known for he's an American football star, but he's also quite known for his blaxploitation cinema back in the day, kind of some kind of like darker dramas, but they were very light-hearted back then. So when I say darker, it was like at the time 70s darker was like the big throw and like coming in like, who's this motherfucker in my place? Basically, what Samuel Jackson was doing in Pulp Fiction is what Fred Williamson's kind of known for. I
mean, I just looked at his Wikipedia. It's Hammer, That Man Bolt, Free the Hard Way.
If you look at his picture, he's doing like a kung fu kind of move.
I'm just looking at them. It is, they just give them all of these kind of like ridiculous kind of names and stuff like that. Although he was in I wouldn't say the original, but the Inglorious Bastards, the one from the 70s, and it kind of, going back to what I was saying, it kind of has
the cat just appeared on the screen.
Yes, it has this this very quick happening action, and the set pieces in it don't feel overly elaborate or overly long. If you look at like action films these days, the set pieces they seem to get bigger and bigger in terms of in the scope and in terms of what's happening within. Whereas this stuff is kind of one location, which is obviously the bar. It's not as if we get 15-minute action piece with loads of stuff happening. It's kind of quick shots, and it's almost as if all the characters such as Sex Machine and Frost, are given the chance to shine almost, So they do something cool, and then it goes to the next person who does something cool, and it kind of plays up the characters in a bit of a way, as opposed to what we kind of see more in a modern film, which is a lot more of a struggle within the kind of characters and set pieces being bigger and kind of the scope of it. I'm particularly thinking, for instance, Marvel films, early superhero films, often even the main battles kind of took place in one area, as opposed to nowadays you get them kind of all over cities and just all over massive areas. So the scope is quite small in its scope, which a lot of the 70s action films kind of did,
Yeah, much more contained, as you said, much more contained, and much more kind of just, and sometimes a little bit more about just like the interactions between the characters, like the hand-to-hand kind of battles, instead of just, they don't have the extra spectacle. It is all about just the two characters battling, or vampire versus sex. I was about to say Sex Machine. It's not Sex Machine, is it?
Yeah, it is Sex Machine.
It is Sex Machine.
I thought you were going to say Sex Man.
My head was going through all kinds of things. Sex heist, sex, the sexpert, or whatever he was.
The sexpert. No.
I think the interest by is that although we had this big build up with certain characters, to go to like the deaths of characters, Richie is offed fairly quickly.
Yeah, once shit starts happening, he is offed very quickly, isn't he?
He gets bitten, and like I remember thinking that I was expecting him to get a much more violent death than he actually like did. When he's kind of like often bitten, like the way he's kind of like bitten in like his neck and stuff like. I was expecting him to get something more violent, or possibly kind of more. He returns later, doesn't he, as a reborn?
He returns he returns in the bit when they're kind of clearing out the titty twister before all of the bats come in. He gets killed quite quickly, Yeah,
it's just the way his character was set up is such a creep and a horrible thing. I think he's one of the few ones where you want him to get a little bit more of a violent, vulgar kind of death, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And he doesn't quite. That doesn't quite come to much. Obviously, we get Sex Machine gets off after they've had the whole battle, and they're kind of before they get to the point when they're going to kind of try to like. They have to end up bordering themselves up when all of the, as you said, all the bats and stuff like that are coming in, kind of thing. You have
that's it. We see sex machines being bitten after when they are boarding up the place, and he kind of, as we see, he starts kind of forming whilst Frost is telling his story about what it was like in Vietnam. We see Tom Savini, who I'm guessing would have done the effects for this film probably, or at least would have overseen it. We see that he starts slowly transforming, kind of in a comical way, because it is like his hands, his nails start to get big, and then he hides his hands, and then his ears start, his teeth start, and he starts trying to hide it until Frost then kind of finishes his story, and he kind of, I always remember that where he just Sex Machine just sneaks up behind Frost and bites him, which then obviously causes Frost to let the bats or the vampires outside it. I always remember that.
I like. It's a really cool. I love when very much when Frost uses Sex Machine to kind of like burst through to kind of help them kind of escape, but then obviously, sadly, Frost meets his maker as well, becomes a vampire too, and it's left to Seth and Kate and Scott to try and escape to the storeroom to try and survive. I love that scene when they get into the back room and they're basically, what can we make weapons out of?
Yeah, that's so cool.
the stake mounted like on the drill.
Pneumatic drill, that's awesome.
Crossbow,
the super soaker with holy water, that's so cool. And he fills the condoms up, with holy water as well. That's so good. And obviously we find out Harvey Keitel's been bitten at that point. And I think Harvey Keitel's, he's quite subdued in this film. I think he's a phenomenal actor, and I think in this film we do get the kind of subplot of his wife has died, and he's
a pastor, isn't he? He's a pastor, a priest, or whatever it goes by. I can't quite remember exactly what the term was, but yeah. So he I guess he is trying to be subdued because he's trying to be some kind of still slightly that kind of holy man, but I guess that's what is good for the arc, that he suddenly has to be this person who's like fighting against demons, basically. But
the good part is he's kind of lost his faith almost, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And through the kidnap of his family, through all of this happening, he has to have faith again, has to rediscover that. And I think it's a very strange film in it, because like you said, that's a really strong kind of subplot there. You think, well, that could potentially be a driving force for a film itself, but you throw in bank robbers, kind of and then they have to survive the night, and we get a lot of these kind of threads, which I think are really they're set up pretty well in the first part of the film. It's just some of the closure, particularly for Harvey Keitel, he rediscovers his faith and just says, well, if I start to become one of those things, make sure that you kill me.
And there's a little bit of the faith that, like, he has faith that maybe there'll be something more to this kind of thing. I don't know if it's because he sees these vampires in some way. Maybe in his head he starts thinking, well, this is basically demons. So if there's demons, then maybe maybe what I've believed all my life could actually be true. Maybe if there's demons, maybe there's angels, or if there can be vampires, then there could be something else out there in the world. But then at the same time, I guess one thing that I would slightly criticize about the film is that I do remember that although I like that it is like a good, like, it's quite slow and then it gets fast, I know for some people who remember this film, they would probably feel that the start of the film is quite slow. For some people, like I enjoyed it, but I know some people would be like, oh, I thought this was a very different film than it was.
And I guess that it could be a valid criticism of the film, but I guess it comes down to that this film is such a strange hybrid,
definitely.
we have so many different kind of layers over it, so many different kind of stuff.
There is definitely the idea that it doesn't fully, that some ideas don't fully get to form, maybe, that was where my criticism was going, is that because the ending is so quick, and we're quite quick to kind of go through the film and kind of get to closure. They go into that room and then obviously they gather together. I love that little montage of like getting all of the stuff together. Always love a little montage in a film, not a musical montage in this case, but it's all kind of there. And then obviously they burst out to kind of battle and fights. But it is a little bit of that. It all kind of, although some of these ideas are there, it does feel like a lot is kind of stuffed in. And that ending becomes so quick that we don't always get time to really take it in. So even though we've built up some appreciation of some of these characters, I don't know if I fully would say, such as with Harvey Keitel's character, or even, I wouldn't necessarily say that I necessarily like feel for the character, because I don't feel like I quite got to feel it as much as I could have, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
maybe not for other people.
No, I think I would agree. I think it's a really really enjoyable film, and I think it is kind of it. A lot of the strong points are good. It's it's very it doesn't just follow kind of blockbuster or kind of follow its own thing. It has its own image, and it has it. You can tell it's made with love. You can tell it's a Rodriquez film, and you can tell it has those Tarantino-esque qualities in the writing. But I think because it seems as if they were like, okay, maybe let's make a film about bank robbers, and then somebody thought, well, why don't we make a film about vampires? And then they just tried to mix it together almost, because once they get to the titty twister thing, it happens very quickly, you know. And we get a lot of characters that, for the most part, you don't really. I would say, apart from Harvey Keitel's character, who yet again I would say you particularly care about, but you find out enough about him for him to kind of be fleshed out as a character. And apart from Seth, who is made by George Clooney's kind of charisma. You know, the casting is great, but it's almost as if the characters themselves are quite, you know, one notice almost. Like Scott, we don't have any reason to particularly care about him. I think he gets a great death, but we don't particularly care about him.
Juliette Lewis, his death scene's great. Like Scott's death scene, to kind of jump on that death is really cool. The way he's, you know, he kind of gets overwhelmed and kind of begs for death. You know, it's Juliette Lewis's character who has to give that to him, isn't it? It's kind of like it's a bit heartbreaking for hers. Juliette Lewis, I think, is quite strong in this film. I guess that's why she kind of gets to be a survivor of this film. But
maybe, but I don't know. I don't particularly have many strong feelings towards Juliette Lewis's character in this. I mean, I forget what her name actually is, Kate. I just keep referring to her as Juliette Lewis.
I mean, that's the thing. I guess Tarantino films, and even some Rodriquez films, but Tarantino films especially, normally creates kind of iconic characters that you really remember. You know, even some of the smaller characters you remember there, like. And I'd say that this is possibly, and maybe this is why he didn't direct it in some ways, maybe he wasn't completely there with it, but I feel like it's not as well formed as some of his film's characters have been in the past. Yeah. Because I'd almost say, like you said, like George Clooney, like you said about his charisma, I'd almost say it's not so much that I like the character that he's made in Seth Gecko, it's the fact that I just think that George Clooney is at the height of what he was at that point. He was, you know, he was like a great leading man at that point in time. And I think that's kind of what comes through. I think Tarantino's good in what he does in the film. Even if I'm still certain it's just Tarantino playing himself.
Yeah, he didn't realize he was making a film.
And I don't want to sit here and as explain to you a whole battle of vampires, because it's not really so you can describe in words. It's cool, you know, seeing them getting burnt up by the condom balloons you know, and coming out with that drill and literally blasting through a bunch of them. You know, it's a really cool concept.
And it does kind of have that B-movie-esque quality to it. So, I mean, I think it's a very enjoyable film, but I think it's a film in two parts almost, you know. And I know that's probably stupid to say because most films are films in three parts, you know. But it is. I think if you were going into it and you were like, okay, I've heard it's a really cool B movie, and you know it has these really cool elements and it's vampires and stuff like that, you might, like you said earlier, you might be a bit disappointed that the start of the film actually does go on for so long. You know, we get until like 40 minutes before we get to the titty twister, and then what happens with the vampires, whilst being really good and strong, is also probably, you know, about 30. I'm trying to remember how long the film is. It's 108 minutes, so you probably get about 45 minutes of when they get to the titty twister, and then the rest of that is probably vampire action. So if you were going into this hoping to have something that was specifically a kind of gory, over the top kind of one of the, you know, exploitation kind of 70s B movies, you might be a bit disappointed by how long the start is. And then it's kind of a tricky one.
Like we said, I think like we said at the beginning, like I completely understand why this film was released kind of where it was, because what I mentioned about like the marketing angle is I don't know how exactly they would have sold this film, because I feel like they would have gone two ways. They've either sold it as a George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino action heist film kind of thing,
Yeah.
you know, or they've sold it as a vampire film. But because I feel like there's very much a good twist in here, and I feel like they would have wanted to sell it. I feel like even Tarantino and Rodriguez probably wanted this to be like, oh no, they think that they're watching a heist film.
Yeah.
And then the twist, and that's what makes it good, and that's probably the way they sold it. But it's kind of like, well, which one was more likely to get audiences in? And I feel like it was much more sold as the George Clooney Tarantino film than it was as the vampire film or the Bats film.
Yeah, this
like,
kind
they
of
never,
take on a horror film.
Yeah, so it is a little bit, and this film wasn't exactly well received. It's I mean, it's received as okay kind of level. It's not actually, the reviews were quite mixed, where people were like, this was half of a great film. Like, people kind of said that, like, the first half, if they'd stayed with the Gecko brothers and not turned it into the twist, they said, oh, this could have been a great kind of heist kind of film with a weird dynamic between two characters. But then you've spliced in this 70s blaxploitation vampire B movie into it, and suddenly it's something completely different, which we know that Tarantino and Rodriguez love anything grindhouse, anything B movie, anything of that era. They love the 70s. They love how weird they got with horror and action and kung fu and all of that. And it's all kind of a little bit mixed in here, and it's a cool hybrid. But then I don't know if I don't disagree that the weirdly probably could have been a better film in this film. I feel like the two films separated actually could have been two really cool, a really cool vampire film and a really cool heist film. And I feel like
I agree with you on that.
Where we haven't got a completely perfectly formed. I love the vampires and stuff, so I think it completely works as that B movie format. But we haven't got a completely perfectly formed vampire film, and we also haven't got a completely perfectly formed heist film. And I think that's why some things end up coming out a little bit under what you'd expect. But that doesn't mean it's not enjoyable.
No, definitely not. I mean, so obviously we know that this came out in 1996. I think, like you said, I don't want to go through the whole of the kind of end part, because we get some, there are some real cool moments in there. So Sex Machine kind of forming into that beast monster and then getting killed by Seth is cool. Scott's death, where he can't kill Harvey Keitel, and he's kind of set upon by them, and then Juliette Lewis has to put a bullet in him. That's really cool. And then when they get overwhelmed and they kind of, decide to shoot the windows open, that kind of stuff, that's all cool. And then the film just kind of ends before revealing that obviously the titty twister was built over an Aztec temple.
I like that. I do enjoy that part.
I find that part really cool, because it's that whole thing of like, and this is what you, from my understanding, you got quite a lot with kind of 70s exploitation and these kind of B movie things, is you get kind of an explanation, but not enough to be it's not to sit there and go, but this is what happened, this is everything. It's kind of like, oh, it's built on an ancient temple.
It's like that classic, like a lot of 70s like sci-fi kind of films or sci-fi horror films. You get this kind of like really dark twist ending where it kind of zooms out. For some reason, the only one that is in my head is it's not actually a one. It's a joke in like Family Guy where, at the end it's meant to be like a 70s sci-fi, and at the end it's like the only way to escape this is to kill yourself. So she kills herself, and then he rips off his face, and it turns out that he was like an android, as it like zooms out into this weird 70s kind of synth music. And it's just like, that's basically what these kind of 70s films were like. They'd have this twist ending, which would probably leave you with more questions than it does answers.
Planet of the Apes. I mean, Planet of the Apes is a great example of that. Just seeing that it was Earth all along and being like, oh shit, okay, it was Earth all along.
Yeah, and that's it.
Just ending, instead of being like, well, it's however many thousands of years in the future, whatever happened. It's just like, it was always Earth, and then it just in the sand,
Yeah.
Just,
we got.
What's it that he says? It was. What was it he says in Planet of the Apes? Damn you all to hell!
Yeah.
It was so cool.
Yeah. I always just think damn
I
dirty
can't
apes.
remember.
He doesn't say
No, I
damn
remember
dirty.
it's just
He
damn.
says it in a different scene when he's being like captured. But yeah, no, that is a great example. Well, that's a far better than one that came to my head.
Some Family Guy
random Family Guy reference that I couldn't think of. That was based on kind of really weird 70s sci-fi. But I think my train of thought just kind of went out my brain then. But
no, that's all right.
I think
you first, man.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna, because we speak about when would you release this. So I'm looking at thenumbers.com, and I'm looking at the years where 1995 and 96, because I mean if we look at October 95, we had Dead Presidents was out. We had More Rats was out. To be fair, that Vampire Brooklyn, which obviously was I think was a bit of a flop, but still. And then November, Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, GoldenEye, Casino, Money Train, Toy Story as well, man. So you had a kind of stuff like that where obviously this film wouldn't go up against it. If we look at 1996, From Dusk Till Dawn was actually the second most profitable film. So there was a film called Eye for an Eye, which came out January the 12th, and that made 26 million. From Dusk Till Dawn came out on the 19th of January, made 25.7 million. And then obviously we had like Don't Be a Menace.
We've got quite a variation of films. I mean, the other thing that kind of springs to my mind is as we said, like I mentioned about them not knowing how to market it, but the other thing that springs to my mind is this is Tarantino when Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction had both been nominated for Oscars for screenplays and films and stuff like that. And it kind of makes you wonder whether the studio was like, we've got a script by Quentin Tarantino. If we put it in January, it might be an Oscar contender. And then they actually saw the film and were like, we'll stick to the date, but it's not going to be this isn't an Oscar one. This isn't an awards kind of one. But because it was Tarantino, they kind of gave it the chance that maybe they'd start to look at it like, maybe he can turn horror films into an Oscar kind of horror, And then they were like, maybe not. But
maybe not.
I feel like, there's a lot of things that could have been mixed around here. I was also going to say, what I was going to mention before was actually that there are sequels to this film.
Yeah, well, there's a sequel and a prequel, isn't there? I've seen the sequel.
I haven't seen any of them.
Yeah,
so.
I remember used to have them on. My brother used to have them on DVD. I know the sequel. I believe is called From Dusk Till Dawn, Blood Money. And I'm sure it follows a gang of. It follows a gang. I know Danny Trejo's in it.
It has Michael Madsen as well, doesn't it? I think another Tarantino regular, people like that.
Yeah, I think he's in it as well. And then I can't remember what happens in it though. And then although memory serves, because I've only watched it once, and this was many years ago. But I'm sure that that at the start, Danny Trejo is flying as a bat and he gets hit by a car. I don't know if that's true or if this is just something my mind has made.
Your mind's his dream, because that sounds like a very crazy thing.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it goes any more into the mythology of that whole Aztec kind of building at the back, or whether it just completely forgets that and goes, we have not got enough money to make that set into an actual thing. I'm just interested. If anyone out there is...
Neither Robert Rodriguez or Quentin Tarantino returned for it. It's also got Robert Patrick in it as well. And then there was a prequel, which was called From Dusk Till Dawn, Hangman's Daughter, I believe. And that was I think it was set up about what set it off or why the vampires were around. I'm not really too sure, to be honest.
That
I might
definitely
actually
sounds like a very cheap. That Hangman's Daughter. It's such a terrible title. That sounds like a very cheap sequel. Whereas the second one, the sequel at least I know had some notable actors of kind of known kind of. Although the Rodriguez and Tarantino had nothing to do with it, but you see what I mean? Like it was some kind of following with actors of that kind of that would be expected to be in there.
I mean, it was straight to DVD, and it does have, although it does have Danny Trejo returning and Tamura Morrison. So for those fans of Boba Fett and clones, you can go back and watch him. And then they made a series, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They had a TV from Dusk till Dawn, which ran for about, I think, 2 series about that.
Yeah.
I never watched that either. So I don't know if there's anyone out there who's got any major opinions on From Dusk till Dawn where it went after this film. But I've never really heard anything major. I've heard a few people that enjoyed the TV series, but I haven't heard anything major about the sequel or prequel that ever made me like go, oh, I have to go and watch that. I'm interested to watch it. And maybe the sequel I'm interested to watch. I don't know so much about the prequel, but I definitely might be interested in the sequel. I think we should go to our opinion on we ended the last one with January Dumping Ground kind of opinions. And where do you think this kind of stands as a movie, and do you think it deserves to be there? I think I started it last time, so you can give your opinion and I'll agree or disagree.
Well, if I remember correctly, last time we did this a year ago, I think that it didn't. It deserved to go somewhere else, but I think January probably was the best time to release this. I can't think when else you would have released this. I don't think it's not got enough horror to be a horror film. There's not enough action for it to be a summer blockbuster or anything like that. So yeah, I think January is probably the best place to release it.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm more thinking about the way they sold it and stuff like that, and that they could have. It was George Clooney on the rise, so they could have just still tried to have got it away with more of a closer to a blockbustery kind of film, but it was before Clooney kind of really took off into action films. A year or two later, and this might have been a blockbuster just for the sake of it being George Clooney and let's sell it as a blockbuster. If they'd sold up the vampire side of it more, then maybe it could have been more of a winter kind of autumn months kind of release. But I completely understand why it's in here. But it depends on the two sides of it. If we're saying the dumping ground is for kind of mediocre films, then I would say no, that this is more than just a mediocre like kind of film. It's got more there than a standard like Madman. I would say was a mediocre film that deserves to be in what I'd call a dumping ground kind of thing of film.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you on that. And I think from both aspects, if you look at marketing, I think if you'd have marketed this as a straight up horror film, then I don't think it would have been. It might have done okay, but I don't think it would have been. I think people would have been disappointed in it going into it expecting to get a straight horror film, because it's not a scary film. It doesn't have those elements to it. And I can't. Yeah, so I think the marketing of this film, I think they would have had a task on their hands anyway, to be honest, because it's a mix match of kind of regular things. So I mean, in terms of quality, I think it's a good film. I think it's enjoyable. There's a lot about the film that I really enjoy, but for me, most of the things that I really enjoy take place and stick in my mind particularly take place once they get to the titty twister.
Yeah, no, I agree with that it is definitely a mix. It is definitely a hard one. It's definitely a hard one to go with. If we're saying the January part, then I think, this probably would make sense. If I'm splitting it into those two categories, because we kind of did last week, we said like in terms of where we kind of decided Madman fitted in both of those, like both January and because we didn't know where we'd put it, and also in terms of quality. And I'd say this one's more of a split. In January, I can like stick with that it could have worked, but because it was so mixed to market it. But in terms of quality, then I wouldn't say it deserves to be in any kind of dumping ground for quality of film.
Yeah.
So, yeah, from dusk till dawn. Hopefully we've made it this time. Hopefully. If you're listening to this, we did it. If not, you'll hear us referring to this lost episode in another episode.
Again, and maybe we just leave Dusk Till Dawn. January just isn't
forever. It'll
for
be
us.
A cursed
Forever.
film. We'll never touch it again.
Yeah, it'll be a cursed film. But well, as always, if you've enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. It always helps. And come and let us know what you thought of From Dusk Till Dawn. You can find us on Twitter, Twitter, Instagram, and you can even now find us on TikTok.
Yeah,
at
baby.
CMT, TikTok, baby, at CMTH Podcast. And we will see you in February, where we have some special episodes lined up for you. And we will see you then.
There you go. Robbie, play us out.